Today we are taping a portion of the history of the Black WACs in World War II. This tape is being made for the Women's Army Corps Foundation Oral History Program, and we are at Fort McClellan, Alabama on May 18, 1990. And it's my privilege to introduce to you the executive officer of the first Black WAC unit that went overseas, Major Noel Campbell Mitchell. And Major Mitchell, well, I'll call you Mrs. Mitchell. Tell us about your joining the service, how you happened to join.
When I joined the service, July 21st, 1942, and at that time, the first women in the Army, they needed 40 black women. 400, they were going to train 40 black women and 400 white women. The 40 black women were all college graduates. They sent the applications to many black colleges. And I'm from Tuskegee, Alabama. I happened to get my hands on one. I had been out of college for 2 years. I was teaching school. All my life I'd wanted to be a school teacher. But after 2 years, I didn't know what I was going to do, and I was not interested in. I wanted to go back to school to get another degree. When this opportunity came, it was a lifesaver. I had two brothers in service, one in the Air Force and one in the Army. And I said, well, I might as well join the women, being the first women in the service. And that is one reason why I joined the Army, because I just wanted to get away from teaching school.
Well, there must have been some patriotic motive, too.
It was, but as I said, my two brothers were in service. And I had seen them in their uniforms and all, and how well they were doing. Both of them were overseas at the time. And I said, well, I just might as well. It would be very nice, patriotic, to have 3 members of the family in the service. I also had a sister who was in the Cadet Corps as a nurse. She was in the service. So there were 4 of us in my family in the service at the same time.
Family must have been very proud.
They say they were.
I'm sure they were. And you should be particularly proud because you were in the first WAC officer candidate class.
Right. There were 39 women in that 6-week period, which was the most difficult time I've ever spent in my life, going from civilian life into the service. We were trained by men, and 36 of us graduated in that first class.
36 black WACs in the first officer candidate school.
There were 36 of us. August 29th, 1942. We had 6 weeks of training. And when I don't tell that very often, because officer candidate school, you know, is months and months and months. But they trained us in 6 weeks because we had to have officers to train the enlisted women who were coming in that fall. So we were trained to take care of the first enlisted women that came into the service.
Yes, and we should say you were handpicked. You were teachers. And
they were all college graduates, every one of us.
Women.
And all of them we had many professions. We had doctors, podiatrists, lawyers, everybody.
I have to say that I was at Des Moines at the time, in Fourth OCS, and I honestly was not aware that you were segregated, that you had a separate company.
Yes, we were housed in one barracks by ourselves, and the other 400 women were all over the station. I mean, in the barracks together. But we never lived with the 400 white women. We were a platoon by ourselves. I'm not sure of the company, but we were the 3rd platoon of a company. There were 2 platoons of white and ours, and we were the only black platoon on the station.
Did you feel that separation all through your service?
Well, that was the height of segregation back in 42, and everywhere I went and took WACs to different stations, and one in particular, Camp Forrest, Tennessee, when I arrived, got orders to go for a hospital unit. When I went to the man in the doctor director of the hospital, he said, yes, he had ordered wax. And he didn't even know we were coming. Mm-hmm. And he says, I ordered wax, asked for wax, but I did not ask for black wax. But I told him that we were sent there and he would have to accept black wax. I stayed there about, I guess I stayed there about 15 months. And then, of course, I volunteered to go overseas, so all of the training was in Oglethorpe, Georgia. Mm-hmm. And I was transferred down to Fort Oglethorpe. But before we left Camp Forrest, Tennessee, I had sent my women to Fort Huachuca in Arizona and trained lab technicians, x-ray technicians and all. And it was promised that they would send them back to me. And before we left, the man really did not want us to leave because we had done such an excellent job.
I hope it turned out.
He did.
That's
and
great.
we had women all over the station doing all kinds of things, not just the menial jobs. And they were doing the jobs that the white WACs would have done if they had been sent there. And he was very pleased with our troops. And they knew, when we first got there, they knew that we weren't wanted. And they sent us to an area that had not been used in years. There were 3 empty barracks that had not been used in years. And we were supposed to clean. That's where we were supposed to live. We would eat at the hospital. We were in walking distance to the hospital. But luckily, there were some servicemen on the station who heard that we were there. They came over to visit. And whenever they came, they helped us clean. They helped us get, we didn't even have any place to sleep, no beds, no linen, really? Anything, just empty barracks. Oh. But we figured out that night what we were going to do, and we cleaned up the barracks. We had some servicemen and women who landscaped. They landscaped our area, and it was the prize area on the station. Great. And anybody who came, they always came out to our WAC Detachment number 2. And we were very proud of I was very proud of my service there. Because that was really the first time that I had a unit on my own. I had been to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, which was a training station, and I was in a receiving company, just trained them and sent them on. They did their basics under me. But this was the first time that I had really had a company on my own. And I took part of the women to Fort Oglethorpe with me. The rest of them were sent different places. And when Charity Adams called me at home Christmas of 1944 and asked me if I wanted to go overseas, I said yes. She says, well, I would like for you to be my battalion executive officer. And of course, while I was at home, I got orders to report back there for duty. And that's where the 688 Central Postal Directory started in Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia.
You want to tell us when?
That was in January 1945. And there were 800 women and 23 officers, 800 women. And Charity Adams and I were sent to England to get a place for those 800 women to live. And we stayed in London. We landed in Prestwick, Scotland on the coldest day. I've never been this cold before in my life. We spent the night there and we flown to London. And we met the commanding officer of WACS, Major Philpott. I never will forget her. And she lived in London. She got us some place to stay. And every day we ended up in Birmingham, England, which was a short distance from London. But we had 4 weeks to get a place for the WACs to stay. There we were given a dilapidated school, a huge school that had not been used in I don't know how many years during the war. They gave us this huge building and told us that's where 800 women and 23 officers were going to live and work. And we drove from Birmingham to London every day with the help of servicemen again, companies around. In 4 weeks' time, we got the building ready for living quarters and for the work area. And when the women came from Marseille, Adams went down there, I stayed back to welcome them. And of course the British were just lovely. They had never seen any black people before. They hadn't seen any black. And so they were just lovely to us. The whole time that we were there, we were invited out to their houses. And of course, during the war, we had to let the enlisted women take food with them because they didn't have any food. It was all rations.
Yes,
So
wonderful
they would take things out to the families. We were invited to churches. We were invited everywhere to speak. We had parades. When we had parades, and we had one parade for General Davis, who was the first black general.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
He was over there, and we were in London, and he had been in Tuskegee, so I knew he knew my family and all, and Adams said that she knew that her girls could march and could have a parade, and he asked us, would we be ready? So about a week after we got there, we had to have a parade for General Davis, B.O. Davis. And of course the girls had not marched, they hadn't drilled. We had just gotten, we had 4 companies, but we did it.
What kind of uniform?
Anything that was warm. That's the first time in the Army that I wore, and that we wore pants, because back there then we wore skirts, no pants at all. But they gave us fatigues and overcoats and boots and pants and liners, because you almost had to sleep in them because the buildings were so cold. And the officers lived across the street in houses that the Army had taken over, private homes. That's where I first learned to make a fire in my life, because we had no heaters. We had to heat by fireplaces all over the place. And we were sent to England to relieve a detachment of white WACs who were doing the same thing that we did, redirect mail to every serviceman in the ETO. They were at a stage where their time was up and they were coming back. And that's why our group was sent overseas.
And we better establish that time, 1945.
It was in 45.
They came over in March of 45?
Well, we came over in January. We came over in January. They came over in January of 45.
The troops?
The troops came over.
And I think they came through Scotland, I know.
Yes. No, they came to Marseille in France. And if I'm not mistaken, for that. Yes.
Some of them came through Scotland.
They might have. And we had rooms all set up for them. Some of the WACs from England came over to train us. We had men, servicemen, to also train us. And they gave us half of the alphabet, and they did the rest of it. The premises was that when we learned how to do it, we would go to France and take over the whole alphabet. So for 6 months we did from where the middle of the alphabet is. And I've never seen so much mail. Now, it was such a backlog of mail, warehouses all over England and France, train loads of mail that they could not get out because they didn't have anybody to do it. Our job was to redirect this mail, to sit with a box in front of you. That's all the women did for 8 hours every day. And they had cards, and they would find where these men were and send it to all of we had all the servicemen in Europe. I tried it one day just to see, and I never saw so many Smiths and Jones with the same number. That is one reason why they told you to put your serial number behind your name. There's so many people with the same name, and the only way we could find out where to send the mail was by the difference in their serial numbers. It was such a load that we had a night shift and a day shift when we first started, maybe for about a couple of 3 months. Girls worked at night and girls worked in the day. in order to. When we left England, the mail was down to what it was supposed to have been. They really worked hard.
It was hard work and discouraging work, wasn't it, finding out casualties for
Right,
people?
and it was monotonous, just sitting for 8 hours doing mail. But that's what we were sent to do, and the girls did it.
Beautifully.
They did it, and they did not complain. They really enjoyed it. We went to France, took over the whole alphabet. Our headquarters were in beautiful hotels. The government had taken over many beautiful hotels. There's one hotel with all of the women, and then enlisted women, and we were scattered all over town in hotels.
In Paris
This was in Paris. This was in Rouen. I think
First
it's
you went to Rouen.
First we went to Rouen. We were a self-supporting unit.
Your own mess hall?
Our own mess hall, our own supply, own military police. We had our own transportation, and we had women who did everything. We looked at the service. When we needed something, we looked at a service record to find out what that person had done. Mm-hmm. With 800 women, we had all kinds of things. We opened up a beauty parlor. We had beauticians, who we found out who they were. We had beauticians. When we did have 3 girls to get killed in our unit overseas. They were an automobile accident. Then we found out that some of them had worked in funeral parlors, and of course they fixed up the girls. They wanted to put them in just plain boxes, and that was most interesting to me because they were, I think, 2 Protestant and 1 Catholic. And when I went to the funeral, I had to go to the funeral home, and the man asked me how tall are they? There's some wooden boxes. I said, well, one's as tall as me and one's as tall as the other lady. So here I am standing up beside caskets trying to find some casket to fit me. Then they didn't want to have funerals for them. So we said, no, we cannot bury these girls this way. And we're not going to put them in just a pine box. So we had women there who had worked in funeral parlors, and they draped it with cheesecloth or something. They fixed them up beautifully. Wonderful. Beautifully. As I said, anything that we needed, we found in our women. With 800 women, you got all kinds of occupations, and we found them. And
they always responded well, didn't
right,
they?
They did.
Job. Were they pleased to go to Paris?
Yes, they were very happy to go to Paris. And we, in fact, in Rouen, though, we did have German prisoners to cook for us. They cook and do our cleaning for us. And of course, nobody was ever, they were very happy because I imagine they were doing better with us than they would have been with them, the other side. We closed Rouen, and by that time, some of the women were getting out and coming back home. I could have left after Rouen, but knowing that we were going to Paris, had never seen Paris, and did not know when I would ever get back, I said I would wait until after I see Paris. We were given a beautiful hotel for the enlisted women, and of course we had maids to take care of the rooms, and we had the meals were prepared by the Frenchmen. We had lovely. The officers, same duties. However, our where we worked was not at our place where they lived, and of course there was transportation every day to take the women to the warehouse or the office where they worked. The offices were spread all over the city, and of course we had transportation to take us back and forth to work. And I was there for about 6 months, and of course I decided that I left the unit in Paris, and I came home on a troop ship, and when I got down to Marseille, I found out I was a ranking officer, and I had to be responsible for all of the WACs who were coming home. I had a group with me from my unit, but there were other groups all over Europe who were on their way home too. And so there must have been maybe about 300 WACs coming home on this ship.
All happy to be going home.
Yes, and I had flown over. We flew, Charity Adams and I flew over to Europe in January, and of course I came back on a boat in December. So I got a chance to go both ways. And after I got to Camp Forrest, I was relieved of the women. And I was discharged in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And all of those who were WACs from anywhere who was going down there, I was in charge of them until I got to Fort Bragg. And I returned home on Christmas Day of 1945 is when I got back home.
And you left the service as a major?
Yes, and I retired, not retired, but I got out of the service on January the 11th, 1946.
And then you had a long and distinguished career as what?
I went back to school. That was one of the best things that happened to me because that was the best GI Bill that the Army has ever had. They paid for everything. So I went to Teachers College in Columbia University and got my master's in foods and nutrition because I had been a graduate in home economics and never used my home economics in the Army whatsoever. And then I said I did not want to teach anymore. I still was interested in food, so I went to Peter Brent Brigham Hospital in Boston for 1 year's internship as a hospital dietitian. And I stayed there for a year. Then I said I was tired of traveling out of a suitcase. I had been doing that since 1940 when I graduated from college. I went back to the VA hospital in Tuskegee as a dietitian, where I remained for 27 years, and I retired 10 years ago on the 16th of May.
Wonderful.
1980.
Tell us what your service meant to you.
Well, it was the best thing. I did want education. I come from a large family, and I would have had to teach and save money to go to graduate school. This way, I got to do anything, and I even had months left over after I finished my internship. I knew I was not going to be a teacher. I could have gone all the way through to gotten a PhD, all under the GI Bill, which was the best thing. And most of the women that I have seen went back to school. Many of them got their degree. Most of them have their master's degree in something and went off to work. But I would have had to work many years in order to get my graduate degrees.
Yes, it was very, very valuable.
It was.
Actually, the future of America to have so many people well-trained, and the benefits of young people going on.
And I tell the people now, I tell the children, I don't tell very many people I've ever in the service, how hardly everybody knows it. It comes out every now and then. But when you graduate from high school and you don't want to go to college, you know, you got to do something. And women too, girls too. Why don't you join the Army or Air Force or what? Join the armed services. And then you can decide what you want to do. You may find out that that's not exactly what you want, and you feel that you want to go back to school. And most children that I have known who have been in service, many of them have made it a career. You don't have to make, I don't know how long you have to sign up for, but you don't have to make it a career. They found out that that's not what they wanted, and then they go back to school. And when they go back to school this time, they really want to, and they will finish. They will finish.
Well, I think that's a great summary of what
they will finish. So it meant quite a bit to me.
Major Mitchell, we've enjoyed very much hearing about your experiences in World War II and believe this will be a very valuable addition to our Women's Army Corps Foundation oral history tapes. Thank you very much.